NOS4A22, Book 2, Trust No One, Chapter 24, The Last Hour. Cammy had remembered a critical fact concerning eternal soul possession. I need you both to know something right now. Stu and I grew up under satanic households, but we have broke free from their hold. This is what I know about your children and their children concerning their wandering spirits and their eternal souls. They can be freed with you if you give the evil powers what they want to make their power stronger. It will be worse for us, but don't worry about that. Our love is going to get us through this. I know it, because it's gotten us through everything. I want you to think of that. You too have this kind of love that will get you through what you have to do. It's going to hurt a lot, but it will free your souls along with your families and the curse that has been put upon your bloodline for these thousands of years. Cammy painfully spoke these words as she held her sore and swollen jaw. You know these things because of who raised you, I can tell. This is how I know it's true, because I can see it in your face that you know it to be true from the life you lived, the lives y'all lived. Mama Baron wept with thankfulness, yet didn't know how to vocalize such gratitude. I know you know what I say is true by the way you respond to me now, your voice. So you know what you gotta do. They want martyrs to make their evil power stronger. This will give them what they want as well as what you want. What you need deep down in your shared spirit soul, to be at one with God, in the light with your babies. I'm jealous of you, all of you. Cammy spoke the final words she would give to them. I can never thank you or apologize enough for everything. I know I'll see you again on the other side. We'll be with you the same as we're gonna be with our babies. I just know it, because I can feel it. Mama Baron cried along with her words as she pouted, while her husband held on to her, weeping on her shoulder in comfort to each other. You believe in Jesus? Stuart asked his only question he wanted to give before his final words. Why, yes, I do. We believe even when we didn't want to. He proved to us his love is real when we prayed to save our family, and our granddaughter was spared right here with us now, Papa Baron explained through grateful tears as he wiped his face to see through his old, dim eyes. That's good. Me too. This just proved it to me right now. We prayed the same things together with you, me and Cammy. Now, you do what you gotta do, then we'll do our best to save this precious girl while we figure out how to save our own goddamn souls. Stuart took the girl by the hand and lifted her as she could no longer run to keep up with Cammy and Stu's running into the deep wilderness in the direction he knew was the way they came from the city suburbs. He wanted to find Lori and Jonathan to give this little girl to them. Stuart knew they would be the best, most caring couple imaginable for this poor little girl. It was only a dream that required the biggest of miracles, but his fight for love to redeem his and Cammy's damaged souls led the way. If he could only get to the edge of the forest, he thought, as he knew he had just enough time to do so. Papa Baron took his wife by the hand as he saw Stu pick up his granddaughter and throw her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, with Cammy holding his hand as they ran. As Baphomet gave birth next to the other giant beast and the possessed dead girl that was the Baron's granddaughter, Mama and Papa Baron charged at them again. this time with no torch or anything in their hands. The giant bull-horned devil beast was too busy delivering the abomination that was nearly halfway out in birth, so he couldn't pull himself away to fight back. The little possessed girl was just beginning to let out the demonic evil spirits and entities from her mouth when Papa Baron smacked her head off as the many demons inside of her charred her body to a frail corpse. The spirits were seen flying every which way until they gathered in one swarm to enter the goats yet again. And like the original Levites and their scapegoat, the possessed goats went running into the wilderness, never to be seen again. As Mama Baron cried with her hands covering her face, realizing what she had done, she couldn't see what her husband was doing, thankfully. Papa Baron stomped on the baby abomination as it was delivered into the hands of the devil beast. He turned into mush as the afterbirth plopped into the giant horned beast's megalithic hands. The revenge was sweet for Pops as he smushed the thing that never should have been. The baby abomination slipped right on through the bull-horned demon's hands with the boot as it came down during its delivery. Now it was just a mess like the mess the evil giant beast made of his children. This was the most perfect, justified revenge ordained by God that had ever been performed in modern times within the New Age. Still, with that said, it felt bittersweet for him, and he was ready to die, as was his beloved wife. Mama and Papa Baron knew what awaited them and knew what was happening next, as Baphomet screamed in anger while the bull-horned devil beast stared through his failed hands at the murdered abomination baby he had just delivered. Instead of immediately murdering Mama and Papa, the sickening beast scooped up the remains along with the afterbirth and gave one handful of it to Baphomet in her mouth while he ate the other scooped handful, slurping the slop heavily with hasteful breathing like a bull out of breath. Mama and Papa Baron were shocked that they weren't instantly murdered and looked at each other in shock. Their guts told them to run, but their hearts kept them there to die an honorable death. The horned demon rose from his knees after a squatting position that looked terrifying with intimidation, and creepily, Baphomet raised itself up in a backwards odd motion. Well, it's been a nice time here with you as my woman. I'm glad we get to leave together. Until we meet again. Thee would be meeting again, indeed, without question. No doubt, their love was eternal, the same as Cammy and Stu's. Now Cammy and Stu understood why they had been brought there together. As they ran with the child, they began to understand. Their whole lives that seemed meaningless had this distinct meaning to shine on through the evil as a light for good, to fight this through to the end. They didn't stop when they heard the screams of Mama and Papa Baron, but just kept on running through the darkness of the forest. Cammy held a lantern and let go of Steward's hand so he could put his hands over the child's ears as he never wavered in his strong running stride. He held and pressed the sweet girl's ears tight to hopefully spare her and protect her from any further trauma. They didn't know what happened to Mama and Papa Baron, but they knew they were gone now to the place where they wanted to be, instead of the place of wandering spirits. Maybe they got eaten immediately, or maybe the giant beasts tortured them in some other kind of way, but it sounded like they had been slowly eaten alive from the sound of it, as the screams, yelling, and hollering wouldn't die down immediately until there were gargling sounds along with an eventual silence. The silence was deafening. It made them alert. As Cammy and Stu continued to run, they were paying attention to every single crunch and sifting of dirt under each step of their tired feet that went on, one in front of the other. The bull-horned devil beast ran through the deep wilderness of that forest alongside Baphomet, the goat of Azazel, with blood dripping from their panting mouths, as the gore ran off and went flying from their tremendous quickness, as they had the feet of gigantic beasts, which they were. These two were supreme beasts of the devil that had endured the wild for thousands of years undying, and so their naturalistic wisdom was beyond any other creature in their inherited earth and domain therein. Reluctantly, they ran in their hateful wrath to kill and devour the last of the barons. Lamb hid this from Cammy and Stu, that their secret mission was to be led to the ancient gypsy village of this old family to fulfill the promise of the curse and end the bloodline in this night. It was the 6th of August, and on the 7th, the barons were to be no more. In order for Lamb to get Cammy and Stu to go on the journey in which they took, he had to carefully map things out and power them with lies and confusion, which are the natural ways of Satan. Lamb had to let them think they were going off the path on their own, when at certain times it would seem so, yet everything was already instilled in their minds, as he had burned the way into their minds. The way. This was the purpose of Lamb, the llama. Cammy and Stewart did not falter in their passionate quest until the end of their lives. They knew the time was near and that the chemical death was upon them. With hope as their strength, they thought that if the beasts would not kill them, then they would have to try to do this noble deed, to break the curse for another 7 generations, to free this innocent young girl. She was the age of 10 years old. Stewart had asked her for her name and her age. She never gave her name because she was too frightened. All she could muster was to say the word 10. The demonic beasts were gaining on them and were able to hear their steps. Within a matter of minutes, they would be right at their heels. After following their scent and their tracks, Cammy and Stu could no longer run, and their walking pace began to slow down dramatically. They both thought that they would collapse, and so Stewart finally let the girl walk on her own, mainly because he didn't want to drop her and hurt her. He was certain that his spine was dislocated and actually broken, but this was of no concern to him. Pain was of no concern to Stewart. He had become a rock, and his strength was that of stone in his immense suffering he endured for the sake of love, not specifically for his own redemption. Everything he did was for Cammy, for love's sake, and now he had another promise to fulfill out of love for Mama and Papa Barron, and for this their granddaughter and her future, if they could be so lucky to be blessed with a way to get her at least to the edge of the woods. Stewart had thought it all out with Cammy's help, as she truly was his helper and his brain. Once he got to where they knew the forest was ending, they would see the clearing of the suburbs outside the big city, just on the edge of the hills below the mountains. Stewart knew that this would be the place to die, considering how long it would take them to get there. He figured they had about 10 to 20 minutes left, or maybe longer, but he was configuring in a way to be safe within his mind, as to not screw anyone over. So he figured that once they got to that spot, they could stop to have the conversation with this little Baron girl. Cammy helped Steward in their shared telepathic thoughts with the right things to say. She gave him most of the words, and he just helped put some of them together. Stu thought that once they got to that place, he would tell the girl to find this street called Main Street and go left until she would find the apartments with only one level. As soon as he thought of this, they had found the clearing next to the suburbs, and so he dropped down to one knee to be at her level, looking her straight in her wide-open big brown eyes. Stu told her about the left on Main Street and said to look for a Toyota Prius with a sticker that said, "Life's a beach, relax," that would be parked in the only single-level apartments on Main Street. The little Baron girl said that she thought she understood enough to find it and agreed to tell Lori and Jonathan that the people who saved her from the place where her family was killed told her to find them because they knew they were good people. The only other thing they told her was Cammy had to ask the little girl to tell them not to go without calling the police first, because it was serious, and that the people who saved her would not live to be saved. When the little Baron girl was about to agree with Cammy and run off in the direction where they pointed her to go, she hesitated when she realized what and who she was talking about. "Wait, you're not going to live either?" the little Baron girl asked. "No, sweetheart, we aren't. We just wanted to save you, because you deserve to have a good life after all you've been through. Now go, before the monsters catch up while you're still here. Run, but be careful. It's about midnight," Cammy said as she was holding her nearly swollen shut jaw. She nodded and ran like a girl who knew her life depended on it. Cammy was right. Those beasts were almost there, and they were getting louder. The beasts had to be approaching in a matter of minutes. Maybe only one more minute from the sound of it. It sounded like they were slamming into trees. "You think they're going to kill us?" Stu asked Cammy through his cracked lips and scorched face, nose almost falling off again as it looked like a piece of squished clay barely hanging on. "No. If they do, we're going to have to make them." Cammy was telling Stu what he already knew, and he asked the question to her out loud just to hear her voice out loud one more time. "I just had to hear you say it. No, not really. I just had to hear your adorable voice one last time. We might just be hearing each other's voices in our own spirit heads for the rest of eternity." Ha ha! Stu had to take breaths in between his laughter. Just to take enough breaths it seemed he couldn't take enough of. "That's so funny I forgot to laugh." "Just kidding." Ha ha! Ow! Cammy forgot how much laughing hurt with her messed up jaw. "Hold on a second. I gotta lay down and adjust my broken back." "Ha! Ha! Look at me. I'm Larry Bird. Ha! Ha!" Stu made a terrible reference joke because he remembered when Larry Bird had to straighten his broken back on the basketball court. "Damn it, Stu. This is hilarious. Why do we have to be laughing while we're dying?" Cammy smiled as tears welled in her eyes while she held her jaw. "Well, it would not be as fun, and I want to have all the fun I can with you while I still can, but you know this." Stu smiled back with tears welling in his, looking at her tear up. "You know you're not a doucheroni. You never were, but you are my San Francisco treat." Cammy looked at him and smiled through the pain as they were both nearly passed into the spirit realm, while their eyes were beginning to turn gray. I fucking love you so damn much, Cammy. Stu hugged her as he fell on her lap to die. I love you, Stu. You know I do. That's the best part about reading minds. I know you love me. Cammy collapsed forward and was fading out with Stu as they began to take their last few breaths together. They weren't quite dead yet as they were taking their last few breaths when the beasts came to hover over their souls to take their spirit forms to the gatekeeper where he would throw them in the lake of fire. Cammy and Stu began to breathe harder once they heard the beasts getting close. These last few breaths made them receive one last burst of energy because adrenaline began pumping through their hearts from the fear of what they knew was coming. It was the fear of being taken to the gatekeeper to be thrown in the lake of fire to suffer eternal burning in the second death. This fear saved them from the chemical death that nearly took their last breaths. The beasts did hover over them for a second once they stopped. Soon as Cammy and Stu began to stand up. The beasts could not stop in time once they mustered their last bit of strength, and both the horns of the bull-horned devil beast and the goat horns of Baphomet, the goat of Azazel, went through their stomachs as they stood side by side. The giant beasts both let out horrible sounding screams of anger mixed with the fear of failure because they knew they had been defeated. The curse had been broken on the Baron family, and Cammy and Stu knew it as well because they could feel it through the spiritual connection they received by the horns that had impaled them and run right through them. Even though the giant beasts backed up quickly to pull their horns out, it was more than enough time for the energy correspondence to occur, and it happened in stunning accuracy with depth. The spiritual dark realm had an effect on Cammy and Stu that added to the already powerful energy that these gigantic evil beasts possessed within themselves that emanated and radiated from their extra-dimensional forms. This energy was received and put into Cammy and Stu as they died from their wounds. This showed them all the things they wanted to know because it was granted to them because of the failure of the demon's mission becoming incomplete, along with the worthiness they had achieved by their nobility through love. Cammy and Stu had escaped the second death and were watching the devils before them turn into wandering spirits themselves, never to return again into physical embodiments until it was their turn to be thrown into the lake of fire. Their time was preordained, and they knew it, and Lamb and all the host of hell had blown their last chance to continue their prolonged time avoiding the inevitable suffering that they have earned for all the years the earth has suffered under their rule, as it has been their legion dominion. Cammy and Stewart died with smiles on their faces, the biggest smiles. They knew that they were not going into that place that had been shown to them, as it was revealed in the tree where they gazed in the transparent black water that lie underneath. They were now thankful more than ever because they could find gratitude in their experiences, because as the stomach acid burned the most excruciating pain, they welcomed and embraced it, because it was only feeling, and feeling was an illusion when it came to senses from nerves. Once nerves died, they knew that meant pain died with it, so they focused on what they knew to be real. The undying and eternal love that they shared that would go on beyond the flesh, because they knew for certain, and so this is why they focused on this thought they knew to be fact. It was because they had already experienced it. They had lived it. How lucky were they had thought, to have been able to experience these things, to be alive on earth and go out of their flesh and blood bodies to feel and experience their spirit bodies. The bull-horned devil beast, along with Baphomet, the goat of Azazel, went fleeing, the same as all the spirits that went inside of the goats, because their place is in darkness, and the light shone too brightly in Cammy and Stu. Their place was in the light, and not this evil darkness that can be felt. There was no more struggling. They never had to feel a struggle again, and know what it's like to struggle as they did all their lives. Their deaths were so freeing. It was their comfort that they had been chasing with drugs as they escaped their lives of satanic abuse from their families. Their own family curses were broken after this day, not just their breaking of the barren family curse. They most certainly did not rid the earth of the evil that was its home. Cammy and Stewart freed souls from this damnation that kept them with the evil that made this evil place called earth their dwelling place within. How triumphant. They triumphed through pain. This pain of their lives was now free to never inhabit any other vessel. That was a blessing they never thought they could feel or experience, and as they died, they entered the ultimate state of euphoria together while life left their eyes. Cammy and Stewart happily stared into each other's eyes, and they didn't have to wait for the other to die because they truly had always shared the same soul. But no, there was one last trick to be had, and the last laugh was going to be revealed as Lamb had made the worst happen as they slipped away. Stu saw that Cammy was in her home and she had killed herself in her room, and that she never really was there with him. Stewart saw and felt that he was really alone this whole time, and they were only extremely high on drugs to think that they were together. They both screamed as they died, while the color left their eyes, and adrenaline let live just long enough to experience this last bit of suffering. Their final plea was ignored by God because something was granted that they were about to understand through this madness, which brought them a little more hysteria than they wanted. This happened because Lamb needed to let them be punished just a little more for all they had done, and so it had to be done. Satan was given this power to cause this harm, and then Cammy and Stewart were forever free once they realized it was just another lie in their minds. They truly died together, and they each let out one final laugh as their bodies lay still with smiles on their faces, frozen in their hysterical roller coaster of emotions that ended on a crazily happy and thankful note. This was all thanks to their need for true goodness and true love. They knew this love they shared was real because it was the only real good and true thing they ever got to know and experience. So Cammy and Stu died there, and they were found smiling by the police that were summoned by Lori and Jonathan, who found little Abby, yes, that was her name, Abby Barron, huddled up next to their car in the early morning when they were getting ready to go to that coffee shop where they ran into Cammy and Stewart. Abby got to live a happy life with her adopted parents, and she helped recovering victims of trauma who were cult survivors. She started a fund and nonprofit organization for people like Cammy and Stewart once she found out by research who they were and where they were from. Their family story told quite the stories for each of them. Abby went to the funeral with Lori and Jonathan that Sunday morning in the city where they lived, where Stu and Cammy met. It was a double funeral after the memorial they had that Saturday for the Barron family. Abby gave a short eulogy. She said, Cammy and Stu taught me something. The only thing that matters. Love.